This woman thought she heard rain, but it was blood pouring from the elevator doors on a cruise ship. Let me explain, but quick warning. Her name's Sarah. She's on the 10th floor of this big cruise ship. Her boyfriend and her parents are there too, and they're all dressed up heading to dinner at this really nice restaurant. As they're walking past the elevator, Sarah just stops. She's like, wait. Do you guys hear that? It's this weird light tapping sound, almost like rain hitting metal. But that didn't make any sense because when she looked outside, the sky was crystal clear, no rain anywhere. At this point, she's confused. But before anyone can figure out what's going on, this random woman starts screaming at the top of her lungs. And when Sarah turns to look, that's when she sees it. The elevator doors are covered in blood, and I'm not talking about a little splatter. I mean, there's literally a full-on stream of blood pouring from the seams. They're all standing there like, what in the actual is going on? And it turns out what no one knew was that just minutes before this happened, the ship's electrician was on top of the elevator shaft doing maintenance. A guest walks in, hits the button for the 10th floor, completely unaware that Jose is sitting on top of the elevator. And when it started rising, he had nowhere to go. The little hatch that he used to get in was now completely shut. Jose panics. He tries to squeeze into this small space between the wall and the shaft just to get out. He managed to fit half his body, but the elevator keeps moving, and all you hear is this weird crunch sound. And by the time the doors opened on the 10th floor, right where Sarah and her family were standing, Jose's body was completely crushed in half. And that sound they heard, it wasn't rain, it was his blood dripping down the metal, hitting the ground like water. At that point, I would have just jumped off the boat. Like, this cruise is over. Medics showed up as soon as they could, but unfortunately, there wasn't anything that they could do. Jose sadly passed from this unfortunate accident. But I'm getting very queasy saying this out loud. Hug someone you love, and maybe just take the stairs next time. Stay off the elevators for a bit, just saying. If you're still here, thank you. I love you guys so much. Remember, you're not just watching, you're the reason why these cases are still remembered. I will see you in my next video. Group hug.
She ended her son's life at a practice range because she believed it would send him to heaven. 44-year-old Marie Moore lived in Florida with her two sons, including 20-year-old Mitchell. For years, she had suffered with severe mental health issues and had even been hospitalized after attempts of trying to harm herself. Despite her challenges, she tried to maintain a good relationship with her sons. In April of 2009, Marie took Mitchell to a local practice range, and at first it seemed like a normal outing. But all of a sudden, Marie shot her son from behind, ending his life instantly. She then turned the gun on herself and ended her life as well. Investigators later found notes and recordings where Marie claimed that she was the Antichrist and she was acting under voices and disturbing beliefs. Mitchell's father filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the range, claiming that they knew about Marie's past and even let her rent a firearm even though she had been banned before. This tragedy left a son without his mother or brother and a family wanting answers that they may never get.
He stabbed his estranged wife to death as part of a religious prophecy in front of their 8-year-old son. This is the disturbing and infuriating case of Star Murrah. On November 7th, 2021, police were called to Star's Vancouver, Washington home, and when they arrived, they found that she'd been stabbed multiple times in the neck. Her son was still inside, but luckily unharmed. Police then found her estranged husband, Michael Murrah, around the side of the house holding a knife, and his hands were covered in blood. Michael told police that he stabbed his wife as part of a religious prophecy. He told them that he killed someone named Starbeast and that he killed Starbeast to fulfill the prophecy. He said that Jesus told him to make a sacrifice for the good of all, so he murdered his wife in cold blood. Michael was arrested at the scene and was initially charged with aggravated first-degree murder, which, if he was convicted, would have meant a mandatory life sentence without parole. However, he was recently acquitted of all charges by reason of insanity. At the trial, the defense agreed that he killed Star, but said it was because he was experiencing hallucinations and heard voices telling him to do it. 3 different forensic psychologists evaluated Michael's mental health, and while they all didn't quite agree on the underlying condition, they did all agree that he had experienced psychosis at the time of the murder. They said that at the time, he wasn't able to tell right from wrong, and because of this, Clark County Superior Court Judge Susan Clark declared him criminally insane. This is a little crazy to me considering Michael admitted to driving over to Star's house that night with a Bible and a knife, so to me that seems a little planned. Judge Susan Clark committed him to Western State Hospital, which is a psychiatric hospital, possibly for the rest of his life, as she deemed him a substantial danger. She also ruled him to have no contact with Star's family or their son. But let me tell you why this really isn't justice. So Star and Michael were in the process of getting a divorce because of how abusive and dangerous Michael was, and Star tried so hard to get help because of it, but but nobody listened. Starr called police on several occasions to report abuse, and just a year before her murder, she had filed for a permanent restraining order against Michael. But the court denied it, essentially saying that they didn't have any evidence of a crime happening. But in her court documents, Starr reported that on one occasion, Michael had threatened to kill himself and had sat outside her bedroom door with a knife. She also said that after they would argue, he would put a knife beside their bed to try and scare her. She wrote how she was scared for her and her son's life and knew that one day he was going to kill her. Everyone said that Starr lived in fear, so much so that she had her neighbor walk her in her home every night. And sadly, that was the same neighbor who found Starr after she'd been stabbed and called 911, staying by her side until help came. She did everything right to try and protect herself, but nobody listened. It was pretty well documented outside of this that Michael was a danger to society. Like, this wasn't just random. According to reports, Michael was in therapy between August 2020 and up until the murder. And during those visits, he reported hallucinations, hearing voices, psychosis, and religious delusions. But still, nothing was done. The system 100% failed Starr, and sadly, this is not the first time that Clark County has done this. They have a horrible history of releasing violent offenders and ignoring police for help. Judge Susan Clark said she knew that her decision to acquit Michael would not be a popular one. She said that she wanted to use this case to shed light on society's failure to treat mental illness.
This guy survived 3 days in the bottom of the ocean in total darkness. It's 2013, Harrison's working as a cook on a tugboat off the coast of Nigeria. This man's using the bathroom when, without warning, the entire boat flips. 1 second, this man's flushing the toilet, and the next, the ocean is blasting through the halls. He tries to run, but hello, how do you outrun the ocean in the ocean? Walls are becoming floors, there's chaos everywhere, the boat's sinking, he's being thrown around like a rag doll. But then everything stops. He's trapped, alone, and when he finally looks around, he realizes he's in an air pocket. But let me ruin your life real quick. Those air pockets, they don't save you. It's a slow, polite death sentence. The oxygen's running out while carbon dioxide is just stacking up, so for 72 hours, Harrison just waits, trying to breathe slow and not panic while he's waist deep in ice water. Oh, and to make it worse, there's predators all around him. Sharks, whales, jellyfish, like he's on the menu and they're just waiting for the lid to come off. By day 3, 72 hours of pure horror, divers finally show up. But they're not here on a rescue mission, they're recovering bodies. They didn't think anybody could possibly be alive in there. One diver almost swims right past them until out of nowhere a hand shoots out and grabs him. Let's pause for a second and imagine being that diver. You're in an underwater graveyard and something alive grabs you. I'm sorry, instant career change. Luckily they spot him, but even then he's not free. He can't just shoot up to the surface. If he did, his body would literally shut down. His blood would turn to bubbles and his organs would have collapsed. It's called decompression sickness and it would have unalived him before he ever saw daylight. So they had to lower a decompression chamber, stabilize him underwater, and bring him up inch by inch before he was ever able to breathe real air again. And me, if I lose Wi-Fi for 10 minutes, I'm questioning my will to live and I'm writing goodbye letters. But that is enough near-death anxiety for today. Go drink some water, touch some grass. If you're still here, thank you. You guys are literally my crime-solving besties. I love you guys. I'll see you in my next video. Group hug.
She found a finger in her Wendy's bowl of chili. In 2005, 39-year-old Ana Ayala walked into a Wendy's in San Jose, California and ordered a simple bowl of chili. A couple minutes later, she was screaming that she had bitten into a severed human finger that was floating in her food. Customers around her started to panic. The restaurant shut down immediately and news stations within the United States started running the story within hours. Workers were questioned and every employee's fingers were checked for an injury, but nobody was missing a finger. The chili suppliers were checked, the beef suppliers were checked, and the processing plants were checked, but still no finger, no injuries, and no accidents. Obviously, detectives were confused, but they wouldn't be for long. That's when suspicion quietly shifted from Wendy's to Ana. Investigators dug into Ana's history and found a huge red flag. She had a long record of fake injuries and bogus lawsuits. Ana had filed claims for medical issues, fake accidents, and even tried to sue a car dealership. And suddenly the finger in the chili started to look less of an accident and more like a setup. Then police finally found the breakthrough. They discovered that the chili finger didn't come from Wendy's at all. It actually came from a man named Brian Rossiter who lost the tip of his finger at an industrial accident at his work. But here's when the story gets absolutely insane. Brian didn't put his finger in that chili. He didn't give his finger to Ana. He gave it to her husband, Jaime Plasencia. You may be asking, well, why would Brian do that? Well, Brian owed money to Jaime. Jaime had been helping out Brian financially, and once Brian's fingertip got severed, he gave it to Jaime as a form of payment. But Brian had no idea that his fingertip was going to be used as a scam. Later, Jaime gave that finger to Anna. She froze it and took it with her to Wendy's and planted it into her Wendy's chili bowl and tried to file a massive lawsuit. On April 21st of 2005, police had arrested Anna in Las Vegas where she was staying with relatives. About a month later, her husband Jaime was also arrested. Meanwhile, Wendy's had lost an estimated $21 million in sales because people were afraid to eat their chili. In court, Anna admitted to everything and was sentenced to 9 years in prison but only served 4.
After this photo was taken, her underwear was found hanging in a tree. Her shoes were placed neatly below, and she was nowhere to be seen. It was 2015, and Sofia Coetzee, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, was waved off at the airport by her family. She was a beautiful 21-year-old medical student and absolutely loved an adventure. She could not have been more excited to head to Kampala for an 8-week internship at a hospital. She just deeply cared about people and wanted to make a difference in the world. Now, her family were really happy for her, obviously, but they couldn't wait to welcome her back. They wanted her home safe. And they'd planned for the November for her to have a big welcome home party. But that party would never happen. On the 28th of October, Sophia and 3 friends arrived in Murchison Falls National Park. It was around 6 p.m. that they arrived at their accommodation for the night, and it had been quite a big trip actually. So Sophia was like, guys, I'm going to go and find some water and I'm going to find a toilet and I'll be right back. But when she wasn't back within 15 minutes, they started to panic. Surely the toilet couldn't have been that far away, like what could she have possibly been doing? They got some park rangers to help look for her, but honestly at this point they were just hoping that she'd got lost. The accommodation was essentially like a small cluster of cabins that looked very similar and like little outbuildings, so they were just hoping that she'd got confused about which building she was supposed to go back to. But after they searched for a while, they had no luck. And hours went by, and eventually days. Sophia's friends obviously raised the alarm to her family back home, and they were absolutely horrified. They got on the next flight over there. They sped across there to try and find their missing loved one. Helicopters were hovering above, police and dog teams were out in force, even drones were trying to get a better look at the area. But again, nothing. And although Sophia herself has actually never been found, some incredibly disturbing items were located. Sophia's empty water bottle was found near the river, and the very next day, pieces of her underwear were found draped high up in a tree. Underneath that tree were her clean, dry shoes. And it's really tricky for, I guess, anybody to understand how and why those belongings got there. Some people say that early on the authorities were definitely trying to blame an animal for her disappearance, but I guess they would do that because they don't want to put tourists off visiting the area. Some people wonder if the police found the underwear somewhere else and then kind of placed it there, or did she fall victim to a killer who hung the items there to kind of confuse officials? Regardless, she has still not been found 10 years on, and her family is still living in a complete nightmare. Obviously, let me know your theories in the comments, because we still need to keep her name out there. We need to keep her case alive and demand answers.
This teacher made cupcakes with her husband's bodily fluids and then served them to her students. Cynthia Perkins was a middle school English teacher in Livingston Parish, Louisiana. She coached softball, helped with school events, and was known as the nice teacher. Her husband, Dennis Perkins, was a sheriff's lieutenant with over 20 years in law enforcement, worked SWAT, and supervised other deputies. They were seen as a respectable, normal couple, but behind closed doors, they lived a secret, disturbing lifestyle for years. Between 2014 to 2017, Cynthia and Dennis were involved in escalating illegal behavior that would start with inappropriate photos that would later involve minors. And Cynthia was not being controlled by Dennis, she was fully participating in this. And it just gets worse from here. Sometime between 2017 to 2018, Cynthia made cupcakes for her students, and she allegedly used her husband's bodily fluids and mixed it into the batter on purpose. She then took those cupcakes to the school and served them to her students, and sadly, no one would know what was really inside those cupcakes until much later. But Cynthia and Dennis weren't caught because of the cupcakes. In 2018 to 2019, Dennis was under investigation for unrelated misconduct in the sheriff's office. During that search, investigators took his electronic devices, and what they found had nothing to do with the original complaint. They found illegal material involving minors, and Cynthia was in many of those files. The FBI and state police were brought in, and as they were digging deeper, they realized that Cynthia and Dennis were both connected to multiple crimes. On October 23rd of 2019, Cynthia and Dennis were arrested and hit with more than 150 combined charges. In February of 2022, Cynthia agreed to a plea deal and she pled guilty to second-degree SA and many other charges that had to do with minors. All other charges were dropped in exchange for testifying against Dennis. Cynthia was sentenced to 41 years in prison without parole, and Dennis was sentenced to 100.
My grandma killed her mom in the same fashion as Eric and Lyle Menendez killed their parents. Scratch that, it was actually in a much more brutal and gory way. And there are so many similarities between the two cases, yet their outcomes are completely different. So let's talk about it. In September of 1990, my grandma Chris was giving her mom Lois a bath. Lois was in her 60s and was recovering from a hip surgery, so she needed the extra help. And my grandma didn't mind going to her home to help her. They both lived in Yakima, Washington, which is my hometown. At some point during the bath, my grandma brought up her childhood and how she was severely sexually abused by one of her stepdads. I won't go into detail about the abuse, but just know that it was really bad. This is when Lois reportedly admitted to knowing about the abuse the entire time it was happening, but she blamed my grandma for it and not the stepdad. What followed has never really been explained, but an altercation happened that resulted in Lois, my great-grandma, drowning. Instead of calling the police, my grandma went back to her house, which was right down the road, and didn't say a word to anybody. Over the next 2 days, according to what my grandma said, she couldn't stop hearing Lois's voice, even though at this point, Lois had long been dead. So my grandma went back to her house, where she was still in the tub, obviously, and she proceeded to dismember her mom with a handsaw. She cut her body into 8 pieces, focusing on her jaw, because she said she needed her to stop talking. And then she threw what was left into a local landfill. She took the major pieces, which included her head, artificial hip, and jaw, and put them into 2 garbage cans, and then filled them up with cement. My grandma then rented a storage unit where she hid her mom's body parts for 2 whole years. Now, during this time, she was spotted by Lois's neighbors in her backyard with a blue tarp and a shovel. But she would go on to tell everyone, including the police, that Lois had taken a spontaneous trip to Hawaii with a rich man that she had recently met. She even faked letters claiming to be Lois that she then sent to everyone, trying to make things look less suspicious. I still have one of the letters, and it's honestly really creepy to read, knowing the truth behind it. During this time, my grandma cashed Lois's social security checks and even sold her second home and kept the money. In total, I think she stole around $140,000. People started suspecting that she could have been involved in her mom's sudden disappearance, and after investigators started focusing on her, she turned herself in 2 years later. Now, during the trial, the defense argued that my grandma just snapped because she had PTSD from the severe trauma that she experienced as a child. It was argued that my grandma's mental growth was stunted because of the abuse, and so when her mom admitted to knowing about it the entire time, it pushed her over the edge, causing her to commit murder. Because of this, my grandma was convicted of second-degree manslaughter and served just under 2 years in prison. She's been out ever since, living in the exact same house as she was during the murders. Because of how much attention that the Menendez brothers story is getting, it's caused me to really compare the two cases, and I just can't help but notice how similar they are. It's kind of scary. But the only difference is my grandma only served 2 years in prison. She's gotten to live a relatively normal life ever since. Meanwhile, the Menendez brothers are serving a life sentence. They didn't get a life, and I just don't think that's very fair when there are cases almost identical to theirs with such different outcomes. Don't get me wrong, murder is bad, and no shade to my grandma, but it's not hard to see why she got out and they didn't. In both cases, the suspects killed their parents in a brutal way. And technically speaking, my grandma was probably a little bit worse with how she did it. They both lied to cover it up afterwards, but while Eric and Lyle only lied for 6 months, my grandma lied for years. They both spent their parents' money after the fact, which doesn't look good in either cases, and they were all victims of horrific sexual abuse as children. Yet for some reason, my grandma was seen as a victim while Eric and Lyle weren't. And I know for a fact it's because men who experience sexual assault even as children a lot of the times aren't seen as victims. And it's a shame because they were victims and they are victims, just like my grandma was. And this all happened around the same time, so it's just really crazy how similar they are, yet how different everything ended up for them. I just cannot stop thinking about this, and it is really eating at my brain. I'm just really hoping that the new evidence in the Menendez brothers case will be taken into account. They deserve a life too.
There's a reason that he is considered to be America's most dangerous prisoner. He committed a sadistic murder, and then while being incarcerated for that, he tortured, decapitated, and then ate his cellmate. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is Jamie Osuna. Jamie was born in Bakersfield, California, where he would be surrounded with gangs, drugs, violence, and criminal activity, and quickly he became a product of his environment. Growing up, Jamie was singled out and extensively abused by his stepdad. When he was only 2 years old, he was physically thrown out of a moving car by his stepdad, which resulted in Jamie getting brain damage. He was beaten, he was starved, he would be forced to watch his family eat their meals at the table, and if it was an occasion where he was allowed food, he was forced to eat it off of the floor like an animal. He started acting out, and one of the first major incidences was that Jamie began killing his family pets, either by putting the animal in the microwave or in the freezer. In his teen years, Jamie Osuna started getting into trouble with the police, and from the age of 15, he would spend many years going in and out of juvenile prison and then eventually proper prison for charges ranging from drugs and theft all the way up to attempted murder when he stabbed one of his neighbours. In December 2008, he would attend a party that was being thrown by a woman who was being known as Jane. Upon first laying her eyes on Jamie, Jane, a single mother, considered him to be very handsome. He was well groomed and he was smart. The two of them would talk about philosophy and psychology. The two really hit it off. However, that very night, their first day of meeting, Jamie would show Jane exactly who he was. At the party, Jane was dancing with another man, and overcome with uncontrollable jealousy and anger, Jamie started chasing this man with a knife and threatening him. He was in prison for this, and throughout his incarceration, Jamie and Jane got in touch. Upon his release, it was actually Jane who picked him up, and the two were officially a couple. When Jane later shared the news with Jamie that she was pregnant, he was overjoyed. He could not have been happier, and he was so excited to be a father. From that moment, Jane did not need to lift a finger. Jamie waited on her hand and foot, and she wanted for nothing. But that didn't last long. After the two got married and Jamie began abusing the drug meth, his paranoia and jealousy heightened. He would constantly accuse Jane of cheating, they would get into fiery arguments, and he began being violent towards her. On one occasion during an argument when she was heavily pregnant, Jamie pushed Jane over and broke one of her ribs. Despite this though, Jane would say that the mental torture that he subjected her to was worse than the physical abuse. During one of their arguments, this sicko stole Jane's mother's cremated ashes, and to this day she still has no idea where Jamie put them. Jane endured this from Jamie for so long because she loved him, and when he wasn't being controlling and abusive, he was love bombing her. But the moment that the violence shifted away from Jane and Jamie thought that he could start abusing her son, she kicked him out immediately. She was not going to tolerate that. On the 8th of November 2011, Jane received a phone call from 21-year-old Jamie saying, quote, "Watch the news, bitch. I killed a woman at the El Morocco Hotel and you're next." He went on to tell Jane that he had viciously murdered a woman who resembled her, and he was coming for her next. This was one of many terrifying, threatening phone calls that Jamie would subject Jane to, but to her, this one felt different, felt even more real than all of the others. She contacted the police and relayed onto the dispatcher what Jamie had told her, but they didn't take her seriously and made no effort to investigate the claims. 5 days later, however, the body of Yvette Pena would be found inside of a room inside of the motel. Yvette was a 30-year-old mother of 6 who was living inside of the motel and working as a sex worker. When she was discovered, her body had been posed in a sexual position. She had been stabbed at least 57 times with an array of different sharp objects. 3 knives and a large pair of scissors were found still inside of her back. She had major blows to the back of her head, her private parts had been mutilated, and she had been strangled. It didn't take long for investigators to determine that their main suspect was Jamie Osuna, and they began the manhunt for him. He would be arrested by the SWAT team days later at a family member's address. He would be charged with the murder of Yvette Pena. However, this case didn't go to trial as Jamie took a plea deal. In exchange for him pleading guilty, he would be handed a sentence sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, meaning that the death penalty had been taken off of the table. Isn't it ironic when killers do that? They will happily murder other people but oppose the death penalty. Throughout his time in prison, Jamie would relish in getting into trouble. He was going to be there for life, and so he had nothing to lose. He once assaulted a fellow inmate with a homemade shank because he complained that this inmate was too loud. He would toy with the guards, irritating them, flooding his cells. He would draw pentagrams on the walls in his blood, and much more. He was eventually placed into essentially solitary confinement, where he was in a cell for 23 hours a day all by himself. It was like that for 2 years, up until he was given a cellmate, and 24 hours later he had viciously murdered that man. 44-year-old Luis Romero was also a convicted killer. He had been convicted of second-degree murder after he shot a woman as a teenager and was nearing his parole date. On the 8th of March 2019, prison officers would go into Jamie Osuna's cell and they would witness the most shocking, gruesome, sadistic murder ever to be committed inside of an American prison. 31-year-old Jamie had tortured Luis. He gouged out both of his eyes and chopped off at least one of his fingers. He had disfigured Luis using a razor blade shank which he used to commit this entire crime. He sliced smile lines at the end of Luis's mouth to resemble a tattoo that he has and also to resemble the Joker. He then decapitated Luis and dismembered him, hanging the man's intestines all over the cell and also wearing some as a necklace. Jamie sliced off parts of Luis's internal organs, even putting some inside of a sandwich which he partially ate. The floor of the cell was covered in Luis's blood, and all around the walls Jamie had wrote different phrases again in Luis's blood. This would have went on for hours, and yet no one heard anything and no one saw anything. The guards didn't catch him doing this because during the time the murder was being committed, Jamie had hung a white sheet up at the window into his cell. It wasn't until the next day that they forced their way inside that they would come upon the blood-soaking scene. Jamie Osuna was charged with mayhem, murder, torture, possession of a weapon, all charges that he has denied. The trial for the murder of Luis Romero is still yet to take place.
I don't know about you, but this video has been all over my For You page lately, and I had no idea what was happening in it until I looked this case up. Okay, what we just watched was 39-year-old Aubrey Horton, who was an Atlanta police officer attempting to break into a home before being fatally shot. At around 5 a.m. on October 4th, Aubrey was seen running through the St. Andrews Country Club neighborhood wearing only shorts and screaming. He's then seen on someone's Ring doorbell camera slamming himself into the door. Now, the couple in this home did not know Aubrey, and the wife had actually just left for work, but she began receiving a bunch of notifications from Ring and saw what was happening, so she called 911. Her husband, who was still in bed sleeping, was woken up from the commotion and armed himself before going down to the front door. It is important to note that just a few years ago, their house had actually been broken into. Someone had kicked down their back door while they were sleeping, so they put up cameras and extra locks on their doors. So when Aubrey was pounding on their door at 5 a.m. in the pitch black, the homeowner brought a gun with him, thinking that he was about to break in. You can hear on the video footage the homeowner trying to ask Aubrey if he could help, and he eventually cracked the door open to see what was wrong. You can then hear Aubrey scream, quote, "No, kill me," before forcing his way inside and knocking the homeowner down. And fearing for his life, he shoots Aubrey, instantly killing him. As this was all happening, a Douglas County patrol officer who lived nearby heard the commotion and came over to help, and they were able to identify the person who broke in as Aubrey Horton, an off-duty Atlanta police officer. Aubrey lived close by, about a half-mile away, but the two did not know each other at all. A toxicology report is pending, which could take several months to be completed, but authorities believe that Aubrey was either experiencing a mental health episode or was under the influence of something at the time of the break-in. Aubrey joined the Atlanta Police Department in 2015 and was part of the fugitive unit. Just days before he was killed, he was honored as Officer of the Year. At this point, police say that they're confident that no charges will be filed against the homeowner since he was acting in self-defense. But this video is proof that life can change in a split second for everyone.
One of the many devastating things about this case is that this young girl was sadistically tortured and murdered by someone that she had complete utter trust in, a family member that she had a bond with. This case really shows that you never really know anyone. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Tia Rigg. Tia was the fourth of 7 children born in the lovely Cheetham Hill area of Manchester in January 1998. Unfortunately, she would be born into an unstable environment. Her mother, Lynn Ahmed, struggled with substance abuse. She would get into a string string of bad relationships with bad men and was often a victim of domestic violence, something that the children would witness, and the children would also witness Lynn attempting to take her own life. Reports insinuate that this happened more than once. As soon as Tia was born, she was known by social services, and the children of the family would spend many years going on and off the register, under child protection plans, and in and out of Lynn's custody, although the children would always end up back with their mother. It was implied in reporting that care and responsibilities of the younger children would often be left to the older children. In 2010, 12-year-old Tia was a bright and bubbly student at Albion High School. She was described as cheery, happy-go-lucky, she could make her friends laugh effortlessly, and she was a devoted, caring, loving sister. On the 3rd of April, John Maiden, Tia's uncle, rang Lynn asking if Tia could come round to his house to babysit his 10-year-old daughter, to which Lynn said yes, she would send Tia straight over. John lived just a short distance away on Dalmain Close. Unbeknownst to Lynn, Tia was walking directly into danger. John had came up with an evil plan. He had developed an obsession with watching violent adult videos, which depicted torture and R-word. After watching it for so long, John fantasized about reenacting these things on a young girl, and that is when he lured Tia to his home and did the unthinkable, going on to act on these ferocious fantasies. Upon Tia entering the house, she would be drugged and then stripped naked apart from her pair of socks. Her hands would be bound behind her back, and for an extended amount of time, John would assault Tia. She was later found to have wounds from a broom handle. He would then go on to stab her several times in the abdomen and the neck, causing serious injuries to her internal organs, before wrapping a guitar string around her neck and strangling her to death. At 3:45 p.m, a chillingly calm John contacted emergency services, telling the operator on the other end of the phone, quote, "Hi, I would like to report a murder. My niece has just been murdered by me. I have just finished killing her now." When the operator asked him why he did it, he responded, quote, "Because I felt like it," before hanging up. Officers arrived at the Dalmain Close house only 2 minutes later, and they were met by John, who wasn't frantic or stressed or behaving in any sort of way. He was still extremely calm. He guided police up to a back bedroom where they would discover the body of deceased Tia, lay on the floor in a pool of her own blood. John was promptly arrested at the scene, and it didn't take long for neighbours to notice that the police were at his house. Now, Lynn only lived about 100 yards away, and so as soon as she noticed police at the house, she raced up and would be heard screaming, "Why? Why?" After the murder of her daughter, Lynn would actually go missing for a couple of days before being found safe and well at a friend's house. At Manchester Crown Court, John Maiden would plead guilty to the murder and the R-word of his 12-year-old niece, Tia Rigg. And he had the book thrown at him. Because of the brutality of his crime, he was sentenced to a whole life order, meaning that he will spend the rest of his natural life behind bars. A review of the murder was carried out, and this showed that social services weren't at fault. Despite knowing Tia and her family and her situation, they stated that this murder couldn't have been predicted or prevented.
Police ended his son's life, so he did what no one else would, and now he's being called the villain? Ryan Hinton, only 18, got caught in a car theft, if that part's true. But when police chased him down, they claimed he pointed a weapon at them, and that's why they fired. But here's the thing, there's no proof the weapon ever went off. And the body cam footage, it doesn't show what they're saying. From what people could see, it looked like Ryan was running away, not pointing a weapon, but they still took Ryan's life. The next morning, his father Rodney sat down at the police station to watch that footage, and I don't think anything could really prepare a parent for that. He couldn't even finish it. He just broke down in that room, stood up, and left, and for a few hours, no one knows where he went. But then at around 1 p.m., Rodney's car is spotted in the middle of the road, and he's just sitting there while Sheriff Larry Henderson is nearby directing traffic. And that's when Rodney just accelerates. No swerve, no brake, just straight into Sheriff Henderson. He did not not survive the crash, but Rodney did. He was arrested immediately, and now they're charging him with aggravated murder, even going as far as seeking the death penalty in Ohio, which hasn't happened since 2018. It's all just devastating. A father lost his son, the community lost a deputy, two families are completely torn apart, and we're just left with a city that has all this grief and so many questions. I don't really have a good way to end this one. I don't have a side to take. I just keep wondering, did Ronnie cross the line, or was his grief valid as a father who just got his son taken from him by police? Let me know what you guys think, because honestly, I'm still sitting with this one. I really hope he doesn't get the death penalty, because honestly, I feel like the justice system only acts so harshly when it's one of their own. Please be safe out there, seriously. And if you're still here, thank you. You guys are all my crime-solving besties. So just know you are not only watching, you are the reason why these cases are still remembered. It's not just a horror story, it is real life. I love you guys all. I will see you in my next video. Mwah. Group hug.
She was a model turned influencer turned cult leader who enslaved and sold her own followers into human trafficking. A cult can really be anywhere, hiding in plain sight, even on social media. I swear, you guys have been nonstop DMing me for weeks about this case here on TikTok and also over on Instagram, which is kind of ironic if you think about it. Kat Torres grew up really poor in Brazil, but she always felt like she was destined for more. She was always told about how beautiful she was, and at a very young age, she got into the world of modeling, which she was quite successful at. And then in 2013, at the age of 24 years old, model Kat Torres was photographed with the Leonardo DiCaprio. She definitely implied that the two of them were dating, although Leo definitely denied it. But regardless, this skyrocketed Kat into the spotlight. She got signed to a really big modeling agency. She was living in LA and New York City, and she was gaining a lot of followers on Instagram where she showed off her perfect life and her luxurious lifestyle. This is also around the time that Kat began using substances of the psychedelic variety, which changed Kat's personality, arguably for the worse. And Kat's online presence also changed. She had a rebrand from Insta Baddie to Spiritual Guru, where she would post about her aura and the magic of eating vegetables. She also claimed that she was a life coach and also a hypnotist. She also claimed that she was a prophet and was in contact with a higher power. Can it be any more cult leader 101? Kat also began selling her magic powers to her 1 million followers on Instagram in like virtual coaching, which she would charge hundreds of dollars for. Like, imagine if I tried to sell you guys like a Zoom chat with me for $700. And then Kat had the bright idea to invite some of her followers to come work for her, come live with her, be her live-in personal assistant, and she would also coach them on how to be influencers and be millionaires. Imagine your favorite influencer sent you a DM and invited you to come live with them, and they would give you this massive online following. For a lot of young women, that would be a dream come true. And for Desiree and Letitia, who are both huge fans of Kat, they jumped at the opportunity. Both of these girls are obviously very beautiful. They were both very young. They had been fans of Kat's for years. They bought her online courses, and they were also both originally from Brazil. And after moving in with Kat, from the online presence, you would believe that this was an idyllic dream come true. 3 beautiful best friends sharing this perfect life, this luxurious life together, but it was not true. Upon arriving at Kat's house, both of the girls were immediately cut off from their friends and family and were brainwashed into thinking whatever Kat said was the key to their happiness and success. Both girls were also forced to bleach their dark hair blonde to look just like Kat's. She's creating these like weird little clones of herself. And the job that these girls thought that they were coming here to do was nothing like it was advertised. They were forced to do everything and anything Kat told them to do, and also they were not being paid, like at all. Not a penny. And Kat also stole their passports, so they were unable to leave and return to Brazil. They were enslaved by someone that they just followed on Instagram and admired. And then for Kat, not paying the girls for the work that they were doing for her wasn't enough for her anymore. She needed them to actually be making her money. So she started to force them into S-work. She created profiles for both the girls on escort websites and then began to sell them against their will at an hourly rate to creepy men online. And then Kat was pocketing all the money. So not only has Kat enslaved her followers, but now she's selling them online against their will, which constitutes human trafficking. But at this point, Desiree and Letitia's families have both reported them missing and believed that they were both being held hostage by an influencer. And then the media caught wind of this, and there were a lot of eyes on Kat, and she had a lot of explaining to do. So she wages full-out war on anyone that would question her with social media as her battleground. She would send her 1 million followers to harass anyone that came against her and even send them like death threats.
Hope you listen to this, you understand this? Die. Leave me and my family alone.
And this is supposed to be like a spiritual guru influencer, you know, talking about crystals and enlightenment. Authorities do find the escort profiles that were made of the two girls and also found out that a lot of money was being transferred to Kat's bank account every single month. So Kat was finally arrested and deported back to Brazil, and the two girls were also brought back to Brazil and reunited with their families, and from what I've seen, they're doing a lot better, but obviously there's a lot of trauma that has to be worked through. And then just a few months ago, in July of 2024, Kat was found guilty and she was sentenced to 8 years in prison for human trafficking and enslavement, which does not seem like enough time, and to this day she still does not believe that she did anything wrong and also still claims to have magical powers. If you watched the end of this video, thank you so much. Let me know in the comments what you think about this crazy story. Also, if you ever even heard about it before, because I had no idea about this until you guys were nonstop DMing me over on Instagram. While you're in the comments, please let me know what case you want to see me cover next, and I love you guys so much, and I will see you tomorrow with another crazy case.
We're being told this is the TikTok account of a girl who allegedly just stabbed her teacher at school and that she left clues on her socials. It was the 13th of January at Senior High School in beautiful Billings in Montana. Just after 4 p.m. at the school, all hell broke loose. Our teacher was actually still in the building along with multiple students. Bear in mind, this was after like school closing time, after classes were done. This teacher was suddenly attacked out of the blue with a knife. A school staff immediately rang 911. They heard screams and the school was placed into lockdown. The students that were still kind of hanging around the school were filed into the gym, and all of the roads leading to the school were completely shut off. Now, thankfully, the teacher was actually rushed to hospital and did get the attention and the medical care that they needed, and is said to be in a stable condition. And reports quickly started to circulate that the girl responsible was called Kaylee, and she'd left kind of like clues on her socials. She had this Pinterest account where she kind of collected photos with certain themes, and one of the themes that came up was school, and another theme that came up was killers. She was seemingly fascinated with Sharon Tate, who was a stabbing victim, and murderer Jodi Arias. She also had a Pinterest board called Let's Make Love with Our Teachers. There's all sorts of speculation, like, do the Pinterest boards mean anything? Does this indicate somewhat of a motive? She had some kind of relationship with the teacher. Honestly, people are running wild with theories online. Let me know what you guys think in the comments.
Today's case shattered me in more ways than one, because the concept of being scared of someone that you thought you once loved, that concept is awful in itself. But then when that one person does something to validate your feelings of fear for them, to show you that you did have a reason as to why you should have been scared of them, to show you that they are willing to take away everything that you love, is something that a human being should never have to experience. With that being said, big warning for this video, we're talking a lot about toxic relationships and about DV, so if you think that listening to this is going to harm your mental health in any way, shape, or form, please skip this video and I will see you in my next one. I mean it. I love you. It was October 30th in 2022. A woman living in a quiet neighborhood in Aurora, Colorado called 911. When the operator picked up, the woman sounded calm. You can hear concern in her voice. She sounds scared, but you can also tell she's trying her best at staying calm and collected. She's really soft-spoken, talking in a pretty low voice. She tells the operator that she has a restraining order against her ex-boyfriend and that he knows that he isn't supposed to be anywhere near her or her house. She's inside of her house when she calls, and she says that she just found his jacket, his jeans and his car keys hiding inside of a closet. And then she says, quote, "I think he's hiding in the house somewhere," end quote. She confirms that she hadn't seen him, but said that she really feels strongly that he could be inside of the house hiding. The woman on the phone was Jessica Serrano, a mother of two, but thankfully that night her kids were out of state with family members. Apart from Jessica in that house, there were 3 other adults and 2 babies. 51-year-old Jesus Serrano, Jessica's father, 22-year-old Maria Anita Serrano, Jessica's twin sister, 20-year-old Kenneth Eugene Green Luque, the sister's husband, and they had their 2 babies with them, twins that were 1 year old. There was also 49-year-old Rodolfo Salgado Perez. He wasn't inside of the house, but he was renting an RV at the property. Jessica was calling about her ex-boyfriend, 21-year-old Joseph Castorena. Joseph and Jessica were not married, but they did have 2 daughters together, and they were in a very, very toxic, volatile relationship for years. Joseph had a criminal history of DV, and he was known to be very erratic, very aggressive, very angry, and just overall problematic. On his record, he also had history of CA, failure to appear in court, and violating court orders. And his behavior and his temper caused a lot of issues in their relationship, and as you can imagine, once they had kids, it only got trickier. And it sounds like for several years, they were in this cycle of constantly fighting and arguing, and then breaking up, and then making up for 5 minutes, until Joseph's temper escalated again, and then they would break up again. Only a week before that 911 call, both Jessica and her father Jesus had been granted a restraining order against Joseph. Jessica's sister had filed for one as well, but there was no confirmation on whether hers was granted or not. And there was a specific incident that was pretty much the tip of the iceberg that prompted them to do that. On October 23rd of 2022, Jessica walked out of work to find Joseph waiting for her. He was waiting for her by her car. He wanted her to go to lunch with him. She didn't want to, but he practically forced her to go, so she went. And after lunch, Jessica just wanted to go home, but Joseph wouldn't let her. When she tried to get out of his car, Joseph pulled out and pointed a small black weapon at her and told her that if she didn't listen, he would unalive himself or her. He then pulled her by her shirt and she fell out of his car. She made a run for it to her car, and when she tried to leave, Joseph grabbed a metal tool and completely shattered the driver's side front window. The glass went absolutely everywhere, and it left little cuts all over Jessica's arms, and I can imagine that she was probably scared for her life. Following that incident, Joseph was arrested but then released, which that was not the first time that he was arrested for incidents regarding Jessica, by the way. But the day after, Jessica and her father went to court where they were granted the no contact protection order. The car incident happened October 23rd. They got the restraining order October 24th. The day after that, October 25th, a family member of Jessica's saw Joseph in their backyard. Not only that, but security camera footage showed that he was there between 2 a.m. and 7 a.m. And that brings us to October 30th when Jessica makes that 911 call. She's very clearly worried that Joseph is hiding in the dark somewhere inside of that house with them. She gives the operator all of this information, and just as the operator is letting her know that they have everything and they're sending officers out to the house, you hear a loud bang and then another one, and then there's some movement on the phone, and you can hear Jessica screaming into the phone, quote, "Oh my God, there's fired at my house," end quote. You can hear her crying, saying that she doesn't know what's going on, and she runs and locks herself inside of a bathroom. Those loud sounds were the noises of her ex-boyfriends killing her family. Earlier that night, 21-year-old Joseph Castorena had broken into the house with a stolen weapon and had hid in the dark waiting for them to come home. When Jessica walked in, she noticed his belongings that were not supposed to be there, and she did the right thing. She immediately called 911, but sadly, it was too late. Jessica's father, Jesus, was fired at twice in the hallway of the house. Jessica's sister and her husband were fired at in the basement. Their 2 babies were thankfully left unharmed. Rodolfo, who was a family friend but also the person renting an RV on their property, walked out of his RV when he heard the commotion, and then he was fired at as well. But Joseph wasn't done. At this point, he had 4 victims, but the person that he was really there for, his prime target, was Jessica, and he was looking for her, and he was going to find her. Joseph now has tunnel vision on finding Jessica and going after her with full intentions of doing the same thing to her. That is what he is there for. He finds her hiding in the bathroom. He's somehow able to get into the bathroom, but thankfully, by the time that he found her, he realized that he was out of bullets. He ambushed her, but Jessica fought back. She knew that it was time to fight for her life. There was a struggle. I can imagine the pure chaos, but Jessica is not giving up. She manages to throw him into the bathtub for long enough to give her enough time to sprint out of that house. And she runs, running into the backyard and then into the street, Joseph chasing after her, trying to catch up to her. But that's when a police car was turning onto their street, and Joseph realized that it was either catching up to Jessica and making her his 5th victim, or giving it his one and only chance to escape. So he turns around gun and starts running the opposite direction, fleeing the crime scene. The first officer to arrive at the scene of the crime was Sergeant Paul Davis, and that clip from his body cam of him stepping out of the vehicle and Jessica running towards him, collapsing into his arms, crying hysterically, is the first clip that I saw of this case. And I can't even put into words how devastating that video is. How devastating the entire situation is. Jessica is absolutely heartbroken from what she just witnessed. Of course she is. But she also looks, this makes me want to cry, she looks so broken. She just saw the father of her children, an absolute monster, but even so, someone that she once loved and cared for. Even if it was years ago, this person she once let into her life just took the most important people in her life away from her, the most precious people, the most precious lives, out of pure desire to shatter her heart into pieces. She ran to that police officer screaming, "He just shot my family, he just shot my family." And then she starts screaming for her dad. In that moment, all you can hear is a little girl screaming for her dad. It's horrible. It is believed by authorities that Kenneth was his first victim. He had one wound. Her twin sister, Maria, had 2 wounds. And like I mentioned, they were in the basement. Her father had 2 wounds. He was found upstairs in the hallway. Rodolfo was found outside. All 4 victims were pronounced deceased at the scene. The 2 baby girls were found safe, unharmed in a bedroom. They were wrapped up in blankets to cover their eyes as they were being carried out, and it breaks my heart how quick they lost both of their parents. Jessica and the babies were taken to the hospital and placed under protective custody. Meanwhile, Joseph is still on the run. Officers are trying to track him down based on his phone's last location. And this is still the same day, okay? So now it's the early hours of the morning. It's still dark outside. And Joseph's last location was showing somewhere between his house and his parents' house that were pretty close together. Authorities went to both houses to speak to the family members. They spoke with his sister, asking if she knew or had any idea of where he could have gone. His sister tries calling him, but he isn't answering anyone's calls, and eventually his phone is found on the ground. He had either thrown it out or dropped it on accident and left it. The entire neighborhood was covered in police cars, and they began knocking on neighbors' doors to search their houses and their backyards, while also sending out a reverse 911 call to residents in the area. It was all hands on deck to find this guy. There were police dogs, officers on foot, officers in their vehicles, drones, areas blocked off so he couldn't escape. But it wasn't enough, because somehow he managed to get away and nobody could find him. 6 weeks would pass before authorities would be able to locate him. At the crime scene, the weapon that he used was found along with his car and his wallet. The weapon was tested for fingerprints, and it was confirmed that they were Joseph's. And even though they already knew who they were looking for, that evidence was just another thing to confirm that Joseph Castorena was the one and only prime suspect in this investigation. In the following days, authorities released his picture to the media, pointing out his very unique large tattoo that he had on his neck. They asked the public to, 1, keep an eye out for him, but 2, be very aware and careful because he was believed to be very dangerous. And then just 2 days after the murders, on November 1st, Joseph's younger brother, 18-year-old Juan Castorena, was arrested. He admitted that he had driven Joseph away from the crime scene, gave him the cash that he needed, and helped him escape. Not long after, Joseph's cousin, 22-year-old Carlos, is also arrested, again in connection with helping Joseph escape. Both of them were charged with accessory to murder after the fact. From there, authorities learned that Joseph's big plan had been to lean on family ties that he had in Mexico. He had fled to Aguascalientes. To family members that he had there, he had tried to hide out at their house, but luckily his family turned him away. And now, with the FBI, Interpol, and Mexican authorities working together, the manhunt followed to Aguascalientes. And after weeks of being on the run, on December 10th of 2022, the search was finally over. Mexican police spotted Joseph, his big lion neck tattoo, making him very easy to identify. He was flown to the US the next day and was placed in custody, facing 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted first-degree murder. His trial began in May of 2024, and it did not take long for the jury to find him guilty on all counts. I think the motive is pretty clear in this case, but I did forget to mention that one day before the murders, CPS removed Jessica and Joseph's daughter from their care because of Joseph's behavior. So could that have been the last straw that made him lose his mind? I don't know, not an excuse, obviously, regardless. He was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 24 years for the attempted murder charge. The judge commended Jessica for the bravery and the courage that she had throughout all of this. And when it came to Joseph, the judge said, quote, "I've had many people stand before me as defendants say, I'm not a bad person, I just did the wrong thing, and I've sometimes agreed with them. But Mr. Castorena, you are the biggest exception to the rule. Your actions were those of an insignificant little man with a big gun who had to control the people in his life that he supposedly loved, and did so with such abject violence. This insignificance of yours will dissipate in time into other where you will become forgotten," end quote. So he was only sentenced last year. This is a pretty recent case, and I can just hope and pray that Jessica, as well as the 2 baby girls, are surrounded by so much love from other family members, and I hope that they're getting the treatment and everything they need to be able to even attempt to recover from this. I'm also very aware that I have a lot of young girls that follow me, not only young girls, also young boys, everyone. If you are please listen to this and take it seriously. If you ever find yourself in a relationship where you start to doubt the intentions that the other person has with you, where you start to doubt if you should fear them or not, please leave. And if you feel that you can't, please go to an adult. Please confide in the people who you know for a fact love you and care about you. There is always someone to help you. You are not stuck and you deserve better. And I know it's much easier said than done, but please remember that you matter, your feelings matter, your life matters just as much as any other person, and put yourself first because you deserve to. What a terrible, terrible situation. That is all I have for this case. I know it was a really heavy one to listen to, so thank you if you made it to the end, and thank you for spending time with me today and for listening to Jessica's story. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
This is the story of Vivian King. On the west side of Philly, 7-year-old Shelly Turner decided to follow in her mother's footsteps with track and field. So she joined the Mount Carmel Baptist Church track team. And she was good, so good that she made it a career all through middle and high school. She attended William Penn High School, and by the fall of 1992, she was entering her senior year. By the time she was a senior, she had ranks amongst the 5th top runners in the country. So the girl was good, really good. She got a full scholarship to a HBCU college. The Olympics was her goal. In 93, Shelly was 17 years old. And what come along with teen girls? Boys, of course. And Sean Williams transferred to William Penn, and him and Shelly, they hits it off. But it was one problem. Shelly's mother, Vivian King, did not play that. Vivian didn't allow Shelly to have boyfriends, nor did she allow boys at her house. On the night of January 17th, 1993, Shelly and her best friend Andrea told her mother that they were going to a party. But in reality, Shelly was going to see her new boo, Sean. Before she left her best friend's house to go see Sean, she told her best friend that she would not be out because she had an important track meet tomorrow. But before she was about to walk out the door, her best friend was like, "Hold on, I don't like that jacket you got on. Girl, wear this jacket." And her friend gave her a leather jacket. On January 18th, the day of the track meeting, Shelly doesn't show up. And her coach, Tim Hickey, is confused and worried because Shelly is his top runner and she don't be missing no track meets. So he decided to ask all the girls. When they couldn't give him an answer, he called Vivian. Now, Vivian told him that she spent the night over her best friend's house. Now, Vivian has a top runner for a daughter, but Vivian has never been to any of her track meets. Vivian didn't report Shelly missing until the next day on the 19th, and that's when everything became real for her running mates and her friends. Her best friend, Andrea, was one of the first ones to be questioned, and she told the police the truth. She told them that they lied to Shelly's mother and that she was really going to see her boyfriend, Sean Williams. And Sean didn't have no problem being questioned. He told the detectives that yes, Shelly was at his house and she didn't leave till around 1:30 a.m. He had walked her to public transportation and watched her get on the bus. To make sure his story checked out, they decided to question the driver that was on duty that night. And the driver said that yes, he indeed seen Shelly get on and off his bus. But what happened when she got off of that bus? Vivian started to point the finger at Tim Hickey, claiming that his and Shelly's relationship was more than professional. A lot of people kind of was siding Tim because he was a white coach and he only coached young black girls. So he was getting that look. And everybody knew that Shelly was his favorite, but Tim had an airtight alibi to where people could vouch for him and everything. So he was written off. But what he told detectives was Shelly didn't even want to go home. He said that she would rather run all day than to be at home with her mother. So this made the detectives go, As time is going by and still no signs of Shelly, one of Shelly's friends showed up to Vivian's doorstep with a psychic in desperate need to find her, asking Vivian, can we just try this? And hesitant at first, but she agreed. And the psychic walked around Vivian's house, went up to Shelly's room, laid on Shelly's bed. And when she laid on her bed, Vivian screamed to her to get out. But before the psychic left, she told Vivian that Shelly is in a very cold place. Now, some of Shelly's friends and her track mates raised $6,000. They made flyers. They were going door to door for any type of information, but nobody came forward. But something happened weeks into Shelly's disappearance. Her best friend, Andrea, who was one of the last people to see her, who also lived on the same block as her, saw Shelly's stepfather leaving out of Shelly's house with that same coat that she had gave Shelly that night. She immediately went to the police with this information because everybody is under the impression that Shelly never made it back home. Seeing that jacket was confirmation that she had to make it back. When they called Clarence in for questioning, and Clarence is Shelly's baby sister's real father. When he came in for questioning, Clarence said, I didn't know who jacket that was. I grabbed the first jacket I seen and left out the door. He said he didn't know that it was Shelly's jacket. He was just putting on the jacket and leaving out. Clarence's job was delivering papers, and he had to be there around 2:30 in the morning. When the police went to his job to check to see if he was there and there on time, his alibi had checked out. Vivian was front and center during all this. She was on a TV show. She was on the news. She was talking at press conferences, all while having the stone face. Not a tear had ever dropped out of her eyes. On February 20th, about a month after her disappearance, Vivian had just ended one of her search parties, and a man was walking his dog in Fairmount Park. That's when he discovered a bloody tarp. He immediately contacted the authorities, but in everybody's heart of hearts, they kind of knew, it was Shelly. And when it was confirmed, everybody was just crushed. It was sad watching because you can just tell her future was bright. She had a bright future ahead of her. Shelly was shot 6 times, starting from her head down to her torso. She was even shot in her hand because she was trying to shield herself. Her funeral was a week later, and her mother was sitting in the front row in all black, in a black veil, but she was acting strange, not like a mother who just lost her daughter brutally. She was waving and smiling at people, and people do grieve differently, but this just was not sitting right with everybody. At the funeral, Sean Williams came up and tried to hug Vivian, and she pushed him off of her and said, "Do not touch me." But he said he didn't take it personal. He just thought that she was just a grieving mother. Vivian was aware of the whispers, so she decided to go on a radio show to clear her name. But this only made it worse. On the radio show, shit got really weird. She started describing in vivid details the last moments her daughter was alive. She said some shit like her teeth was glistening white in the moonlight. It was weird. But she said all this when the microphones was off. So the interviewer was like, nah, Something ain't right. The interviewer went straight to the police. When Vivian got wind that the popular radio host went to the police, she went to the police and said, I'll take a lie detector test. She took it and she failed. They interrogated her for 15 hours and she broke. She said that she was very drunk and she was angry that Shelly had came in late. The two got to arguing and she told Shelly that she was going to take her to the police station so they can take her to a juvenile detention center. She forced Shelly into the car. She didn't even let her put her shoes back on. But she passed the police station. She said that she was going to Fairmount Park so the two can just duke it out so they could fight. But when Shelly got out the car, she hit Shelly with the butt of a gun, knocking her down. That's when she shot her 6 times. And Shelly put her hand up trying to defend herself. And that's when she shot her hand too. 43-year-old Vivian King was arrested on March 7th, 1993. And she immediately recanted her confession. She said she was coerced into making that confession due to long hours. And the police were banking on this confession because that's all they had. They didn't have no murder weapon. They didn't have no witnesses. It's 1993. Ain't no forensics or nothing like that. It was just her word against their word because the confession was not recorded. During her trial in November of 1993, she kept contradicting herself. None of her stories made sense. But the jury felt in their heart of hearts that if she was not drunk, she would have not killed her daughter. They said that she acted in a drunken rage and that it was not premeditated. In June of 1994, she was sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison. She served only 10 years and went back to her life. They say this lady is still living in Philadelphia, still alive. I didn't see nothing to where she was deceased. But this is a first-class case of jealousy. You used to run track and you didn't make it as far as your daughter had made it. You was jealous. You had a top runner for a daughter and never been to none of her meetings. That's insane to me. I didn't see not a tear shed in all of the footage I didn't see no type of remorse. And I forgot to mention, after her confession, she laughed. She chuckled. The police called her the devil. And I also forgot to mention that she was sentenced to 3rd-degree murder. I ain't never heard of that. But I just wonder what life has been like for old Vivian King. Rest in peace to Shelly Turner. You were a bad girl on that track. I get pissed with cases like this. With young people with potential and it just get taken away. But by your mama, this really made my blood boil, y'all tape.